Citizen detectives, welcome back to Pop Culture with Pat. You guys know what time it is. It's time to talk about Yellowjackets again. This week we are going to be talking about Season 3, Episode 6, titled Thanksgiving. Make sure to clarify that it's Canada's Thanksgiving. And this is going to be my spoiler review, breakdown, recap. I'm going to be discussing some thoughts, theories that I have with you guys. Want to get some input from you as well, as I always do. If this is your first time watching one of my videos, welcome. Thank you guys so much for all the love that you've shown my videos, and if you are new, please hit that subscribe button as well as the bell button next to it. That way you get notifications for all my new videos. Give this video a thumbs up, and again, this is going to have spoilers in it, so make sure you have seen the episode. If you haven't, watch it, come back and watch this, and then that way we can discuss. Otherwise, if you don't care about spoilers, then feel free to continue watching because holy shit, we got a lot to talk about here. So the episode opens up in the modern day. We see Shauna. She comes home, and as she comes into the house, Jeff wakes up, who is waiting for her on the couch. She explains that she had to go to the city and that Lottie is dead, and that shocks Jeff. It also shocks Callie, who ends up coming into the room. And right after that happens, Shauna mentions how she's murdered, and so Callie runs to her room, pulls out the tape, gives it to her mom, and says, I messed up by hiding this. I'm sorry about that. Maybe this has something to do with Lottie. And then Shauna tells the both of them and says, hey, pack your bags. We gotta go because someone's trying to kill us. We then have the intro of the episode, and after the intro, we go into the 90s portion of the timeline where we see Nat comes over to Coach Scott, wakes him up for some breakfast, and as she's giving him breakfast, mentions how his cut doesn't look infected, but there's no way that thing doesn't get infected at this point, right? The only thing that I'm wondering, which I can't remember over the past couple episodes, I'm just blanking off the top of my head right now, so if I am forgetting this, my bad, guys. But do any of them know where the supplies that Coach Scott found, where they are? I know they were in the cave, but did they end up finding those? I can't remember off the top of my head. Obviously, those would probably be pretty helpful in this situation. So then we have Coach Scott and Natalie talking to each other, and Coach Scott then asks why he's still alive at this point and explains how living here in this pit just waiting to be cut up for meat isn't exactly living, and so he begs Natalie to kill him because he knows she's a good lawyer and always knows what needs to be done, but Natalie doesn't want to do that at this point. And after that, it then cuts to a bunch of different meals, if not different days, of Coach Scott just refusing to eat and him just begging Natalie again and again and again for her to kill him, but she won't, until one day he kind of pulls out a last resort and says, you know what? I was the one who actually tried burning the cabin down. I tried killing all you guys, especially you, Natalie, trying to get a rise out of her, but it doesn't work. She doesn't believe him, and I don't believe him either. I think this is just kind of, like I said, a last resort to get a rise out of her, but it doesn't work. But man, I feel so bad for Ben at this point. He doesn't deserve this at all. And I know I've seen a lot of other people, they feel the same way. And he tells Nat that she sentenced him to death and that she has to keep that promise, but she refuses once again and finally decides that someone else has to start taking care of him instead of her. And after that, we go to Van and Tai, who are talking to each other about how the nights are starting to get colder again, and they're probably going to be here for another winter, which makes sense where we're getting into the Thanksgiving season. And then they also reference how they wonder if when Melissa and Shauna, they make out with each other, that if Shauna makes Melissa wear Jackie's old clothing, which is kind of messed up. But Tai also says how Shauna seems a little bit better at this point, too. We then jump into the modern day timeline where we see Misty. She's using her charm once again. She's talking to one of her friends, Carl, and asking if he can take a look at the material that she got from under Lottie's nails. And as she's leaving, Walter ends up reaching out to her and says, hey, what did you say to Shauna? Because she hasn't been answering me. We go back to Shauna. She's with her family. They check into a motel. And when they get in there, Jeff talks to her and says, how bad exactly is this situation? Is it bad like the stuff from the journals? And Jeff just explains how at this point he needs the truth from her, which I totally understand. I totally get to a degree that Shauna, she's wanting to protect her family. I understand that part of it, but also at the same time, both Callie and Jeff are so involved in this at this point that I feel like you really have to kind of clue them in a little bit more also as well, Shauna. And right after Shauna says that she's going to start trusting Jeff more, she pretends to be dizzy. That way he'll go and get some snacks for her. As soon as he leaves, she ends up calling Tai and says, hey, can I talk to Van? Tai says, well, why don't you call her yourself? And Shauna says, you know Van and I aren't close like that or aren't friends like that, something along those lines, which I thought was kind of interesting. Do you guys think that something else happens between them additionally in the 90s timeline from what we've already seen? I just thought that line was kind of interesting there. Finally, Shauna gets Van on the phone and she asks if she has a DAT tape player, and that if she does, can she bring it to the Jolly Hitcher where they are currently staying at. And so Van ends up telling Tai about Shauna and then tells the room service that they have in there to get out of there. And as soon as they leave, she looks over at Tai and says, "What is going on with you? Lottie's dead and our friend is in trouble and you just seem like you don't really care. You're here getting pampered up." And Tai says, "Everything seems to be falling apart at this point, so I just want to feel good for the moment." Tai then mentions to Van, she says, "Who uses DAT tape players anymore?" And Van ends up saying, "Super intense birders." And as soon as she says that, she looks at Tai and tells her to get dressed. And so obviously she knows something here. We know Misty has a bird, but who else could it possibly be? Then after that, we then end up going back to the 90s timeline again, where we see Travis and Akilah start talking, and Travis asks if she's seen anything else because I guess her and Lottie went back to the caves the other day. And you can just tell at this point, Lottie, I think, really kind of has her hooks and her influence on Akilah, and they're really playing with fire, I feel like, keep going continuously back into those caves. And Travis says how he's worried about Akilah, and we all are, Akilah, we don't want to lose you, don't go back, don't keep going back into those caves. Then after that, we see Mari. She comes over and she's trying to help feed Coach at this point. When she gets over there, it smells awful, and so she ends up running and trying to go get help. And when she gets over there, they start discussing what they're going to do about Coach. And so Mari asks Akilah, what else has she seen up to this point? And Akilah mentions a lot of things from the past and from home. And Tai kind of questions that. And when she does that, Lottie looks at her and says, "No, you shouldn't question that." And so I'm really kind of starting to think that I don't think Lottie necessarily maybe wants to leave at this point anymore. But I want to get your guys' input on that. I feel like Lottie doesn't want to, and do you think there's anyone else in the group that maybe they don't want to necessarily leave anymore because they feel like they have a little bit more power here, they're a little bit more wanted here? So I definitely feel like there's some girls, some people in the Yellowjackets camp that the longer they've been out here, maybe they're kind of adjusting to it and they don't want to necessarily. They're not in a rush to get home. As the Yellowjackets, as they're talking, they say that they have to get home soon because winter is coming, and so they got to keep that hope alive that they're going to get home. And then it's at that point that Lottie says that she has an idea. And quickly jump back into the present day timeline where we see Misty. She's walking in the city, and as she's walking along, all of a sudden this guy comes up in a limo, drops out these 2 trash bags, and we find out that it's basically a peace offering from Walter, and says, "I wasn't able to find anything in here, but maybe another fellow citizen detective would be able to." From there, we then jump back into the 90s timeline again. This time we see Nat talking to Misty, and as she's talking to Misty, she asks her, did she make the right decision as far as keeping Coach alive because of the condition that he's in currently? And Misty says, no, we have to do everything we can to keep him alive at this point. After that, we go to Travis and Natalie who are talking, and Travis asks if Coach is really that bad and says, what if Akilah's visions were just bullshit? And Natalie kind of responds, looks at him and says, well, weren't you the one who said that she was going to have those visions? And Travis's response just really is kind of shaky, really isn't that sure of himself. And so he knows something is wrong. It's like, Travis, come on, you know something is wrong. Say something, do something. From there, then we jump back into the modern timeline again. This time we see Van. She's going through her stuff looking for the DAT player, and as she's looking through her stuff, she sees this disconnected phone. It starts ringing, and so she picks it up, and when she picks it up, Ty's on the other side and saying help. Now, my thoughts are, I think that that's the good Ty that's calling, asking for help, and meanwhile, the evil or the dark Ty has taken over, and has actually taken over for a while now at this point. I feel like we've been getting little clues to that, but I want to hear what your guys' thoughts are. And do you think that Van realizes that, or is at least starting to realize that at this point? Then after that, we then end up seeing Misty. She's going through the stuff in the trash, and she finds that Lottie was visiting this cafe, which usually she wouldn't go to this type of place, and so Misty ends up going there, and when she goes there, she sees that Lisa works there. I was like, holy shit, we finally see her. I know myself, a lot of you guys have been wondering if or when she was going to pop up, and so it was cool to see her pop back up in this episode. And then after that, we then go back to Shauna, Callie, and Jeff, and all of a sudden Shauna gets a call. It's Van, and so she says she has to go outside and meet Van, and Jeff says, well, hey, I'll come along with you, but Shauna says, no, you gotta stay here and watch Callie. And so as she's getting ready to leave, Callie comes over, gives her mom a hug, and sure enough, as soon as she's doing that, she takes her phone, turns on the recording, and puts it in her mom's bag as she's going outside. After that, we then jump back into the 90s timeline again, where we see Misty. She goes over to Ben and says, basically ask him one more time to eat, and when he doesn't, all of a sudden, several other members of the Yellowjackets come in, and they basically force him to eat by shoving a tube down his throat. And just like Travis says after the scene is done, that was totally fucked. After that, Nat comes in, is talking to Ben, sees him spitting up blood, and he just looks like shit at this point. And which, by the way, I got to give a shout out to the hair and makeup team, because he just looks disgusting at this point in the episode. As they're talking, Ben ends up asking why you can't just let him die, and Nat says, well, we just can't. And at that point, Ben starts laughing almost maniacally. And it was really this scene in particular I felt was one of the hardest scenes to watch, just because Ben is suffering so much at this point, and Nat knows that this is wrong. Then after that, we then end up going to Lottie. We see her. She's trying to connect with the wilderness. And then Akilah comes over and says, I need to see if I missed anything, because I think she's starting to feel guilty about Ben at this point as well. I think a lot of them are. Then we go back to the present day again, where we see Shauna, Van, and Tai. They get into the car and they start listening to the tape. I was like, holy shit, we are finally going to hear what is on this tape. We have been waiting so long for this. And so they start listening to the tape, and we hear a woman's voice say, what is this? Then we go back to Misty, who ends up approaching Lisa and says that she thinks that she was the one that maybe killed Lottie. But Lisa says, no, even though I was in a cult that ruined my life, that wasn't me. And that she agrees to tell Misty what she knows, as long as they stay out in the open, because she doesn't trust Misty at this point, which I totally understand. That's understandable. Then we go back to Tai, Van, and Shauna in the car. We hear them listening to the tape, and we hear some chanting, and then there's a scream, and at that point, they shut it off. Van says the only people that know about this are either here or they're dead. It's at that point that Shauna discovers that Callie's phone is in her bag, and it's been recording this whole thing, and so she tells them that she has to go. Then we jump back into the 90s timeline again, where Akilah goes back into the cave. She has another vision, and when she has this vision, we see the Yellowjackets kind of going in and out, and then all of a sudden this claymation stop motion bear ends up coming into the area where the Yellowjackets were, and it stands up, gets back down, and all of a sudden you see it gets this third eye. And this thing, just like all these visions have been creepy as fuck, really disturbing. But what do you guys think that whole thing means? The bear with a third eye. Definitely want to hear your thoughts are, because I'm sure you guys got a lot regarding that. From that, we then end up going to Nat, who she can't sleep. It's the middle of the night. She can't sleep, so she gets up and she goes and she grabs a knife and starts heading over towards Coach Ben. Travis sees her though and tries to stop her, but says, no, go back to bed. You don't have to be involved with this. And Travis says, you know they're not going to forgive you if you end up doing this. But eventually he ends up letting her go through. She goes over, sees Coach, and he says thank you as she finally kills him. And I just got to give a shout out to both Sophie and Steven in the scene. Phenomenal acting from both of them. This scene had me tearing up right here. And then the morning comes and we see Nat. She ends up coming out of the area. She's all covered in blood. Misty sees her, starts screaming, what did you do? And then as she's walking, the others see her as well. They ask the same thing, and she says, I kept a promise. And so that's it. Coach Ben is dead. I mean, at this point, just the condition that he was in, you could tell that he just didn't want to be around anymore. So it sucks, because I mean, I really felt for Coach in this season specifically. I know a lot of you guys did too, so that's a really tough blow, and they weren't kidding, guys, when they were saying that we were going to get a body count this season. So I want to get your guys' opinions on Coach Ben's death. Was that okay with you guys? Are you pissed off that they killed him? Definitely leave your thoughts down below. When we see Misty, she ends up going in to see Coach, and as she's kind of crying a little bit, she stops herself. She smacks herself and says, stop it! And that really just caught me off guard there. Even though she's done that in the present day, I can't if it was season 1, season 2, but I remember her doing that before in the present day, and so that was a little bit of a flashback to that, and then she ends up saying goodbye to Coach. Then the Yellowjackets, they start freaking out. They start pushing Nat down, hitting her. And Tai says, you know what, we need to have another trial again. But Shauna steps in and says, no more trials. She's obviously guilty. And then at that point, Lottie steps in and says that Shauna will be the one to lead us now. And this is, I think, what Shauna has been wanting. You know that she was mad when Nat ended up getting picked to be the leader. And so she's been kind of building up to this, her ascent to power. And so, yeah, I kind of have a feeling just with everything that's been going on in the season, shit is going to really hit the fan even more now. Even now in this moment, she does say, she kind of gives a little speech and says, you know, we need to stick together. But yeah, I'm a little nervous about what's to happen with her reign of power here. He ends up saying, well, what about Nat? And Shauna says, well, she's going to be the one to help prepare the feast, to help honor Coach Ben. And so what do you guys think as far as Shauna finally being Antler Queen? Definitely want to hear your guys' thoughts on that, so let me know. Then we jump into the present day timeline again, where we see Shauna. She comes into the room and tells Callie that we got to have another one of our special mother and daughter conversations about her recording her conversations. And Callie says, well, hey, I have a right to know about this. And Shauna just says at that point to get out, because before she does something that she's going to regret. But as soon as she goes to leave, we see that Callie, she still has the recorded conversation on her phone. Do you guys think that Callie is maybe a little too smart for her own good? I feel like this is going to get her in trouble at some point, more than it already has. There, we then quickly jump back into the 90s timeline again, where we see Nat. She starts cutting up Coach Ben, but before that happens, she takes off Jackie's necklace. Then we jump back into the modern day again, where we see Misty and Lisa having their conversation. Lisa says that Lottie actually gave her the $50,000, and so that's why Lottie was at the bank that day. And then Lisa goes on to remind Misty that she was the one who killed Natalie, and that Lottie, she was just upstairs, which I still don't believe that. Obviously, I think that someone did kill her. If she has any more questions on that maybe she should go to her friend Tai, because Tai was the one who met up with her that day. And so that gives credence to a lot of you people that were thinking that maybe it was Tai. I know I've been kind of split on whether it being Shauna or Tai, but I don't know, now it's kind of leaning more towards maybe it was Tai. And go back to Van and Tai, where Tai all of a sudden wakes up screaming, saying help, just like in the phone call. But then all of a sudden she goes back to bed, which I think that was Evil Tai taking back over and saying, oh, don't worry about it, just go back to bed, Van. And then we see Misty, she's at her house. She ends up texting Tai saying, hey, we have to talk. And right as that happens, she ends up getting a message from Carl saying that the results are back in from the DNA profile. She can't really make heads or tails of it though, and so she reaches back out to Walter and says, hey, maybe you could help me with this. Then to end the episode, we go back to the 90s timeline, where we have a little conversation between Mari and Nat. And Mari basically says to Nat, without actually saying it, that she respects what she did for Coach Ben. And so that was a nice little moment for Mari. I like how we've gotten those for some of the characters. Mari, which a lot of people have loved to hate throughout the seasons in the show, but also we've gotten them for Shauna. And so I really appreciate those little moments where some of the other stuff that the characters have done have been really, you know, one way where you just want to hate the character. And so I appreciate those little moments like that. As they're getting ready for the ceremony, we see Misty, she starts humming, and after she starts humming, Lottie says, this is wrong, this isn't supposed to happen, and starts hearing this whispering and laughing, and so she screams, and after she screams, we hear that scream that we had heard earlier in the season coming from the trees that we thought. And so as that starts happening, she tells the rest of the group to start singing and dancing in response to that. And this whole scene, the way that it was shot, the screaming, the dancing and everything, just gave me chills. I love this scene. And then to end the episode, all of a sudden a couple people show up. One guy says hello. The Yellowjackets are just absolutely shocked seeing other people here. And then he looks over, sees Coach Ben's head, says, what the fuck? And that's the end of the episode. Holy shit, what a game changer. So we have new people finally showing up here. When watching that episode, talking about it, I was getting some chills. I thought that was a crazy way to end the episode. Definitely a game changer. Who do you think these people are? What's going to happen to them? Definitely want to hear your guys' thoughts down below in the comments. So what a crazy episode this week. I can't wait to see what happens, especially with this cliffhanger. So definitely a lot to discuss. Again, if you guys are new to the channel, hit that subscribe button as well as the bell button next to it. That way you get notifications for all my new videos. I can't wait to hear all your guys' thoughts. Thank you guys so much again for all the support. It's been so much fun. We got a couple more episodes before the end of the season, and I'm sure shit's just going to get even more crazier before the time we get there. So thank you guys so much again, and I can't wait to see you guys next week. Buzz buzz.